I will set a new deadline of 10 or 12 days from today. I wanted to be generous and gave 50 days, but no progress. I emphasize 10 to 12 days. We'll probably announce it tonight or tomorrow. There's no point in waiting. If it's clear what the response will be, why delay? There will be sanctions and possibly secondary duties. I don't want to do that to Russia. I love the Russian people, a wonderful people, but I think something will happen sooner or later. It has to happen soon. The new ultimatum of the US president is an attempt to intimidate Russia, or a decision on Vladimir Putin has already been made in Washington. With whom has the US secretly agreed to strike a blow against the Kremlin regime? We're talking about this and other topics live. My name is Anastasia Noritsyna, and with me is Boris Pincus, a public figure and president of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club. This is Boris Yakovlevich. Hello. Good afternoon. Glad to be on your channel. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Friends, write comments. Indicate from what country and city you are watching us. Write what you think about the events after 10 to 12 days of Donald Trump. Boris Yakovlevich, a question for you. Why did the US president suddenly shorten the ultimatum? And what will happen in 10 to 12 days? I wouldn't say it was out of the blue. The idea of 50 days was flawed. Trump had already given both 14 days, 90 days, 100 days, and it's been 6 months. Vladimir Putin both started publicly ignoring Donald Trump's demands and continues to do so. Moreover, to every request to stop shelling or stop attacks on Ukraine, not even talking about negotiations, Putin responded by intensifying strikes on Ukrainian territory. Judging by the dynamics of Vladimir Putin's attacks against Ukraine, it appears that he is seeking to break his own record for the number of aircraft and missiles used, striking everywhere, west, south, east, north, indiscriminately. Putin continues to attack, destroying civilians and infrastructure. Donald Trump sees it all. Even his inner circle is already asking the question, why was it necessary to grant these 50 days? Is this a carte blanche for Vladimir Putin to attack and destroy? You can do serious damage to Ukraine in 50 days. Why was so much time given? Donald Trump is under pressure from a group of advisors led by Marco Rubio, from congressmen including Lindsey Graham, author of Tough Sanctions, and from the American people. According to polls, the public is demanding support for Ukraine until victory.
Это два. И третье, конечно же, народ. Вы посмотрите, опросы. По опросам народ просит помогать Украине до победного конца.
Everyday Fox News, CNN, and other TV channels show what is happening in Kiev, Odessa, Dnipro, and other cities where Russian missiles and drones are hitting. All of this is being seen by the American people. Donald Trump's foreign policy rating on Ukraine is one of the lowest. Trump realizes this. He has nowhere to retreat to, which is why he was forced to announce a shortened timeline. However, the dates don't bother me. They don't matter. The sanctions have been in place for a long time. But what has changed in Russia?
Санкции санкциями. Вот столько времени санкции существуют, что изменилось в России?
Russia continues to produce and purchase weapons, including missiles, drones, and artillery, receiving them on favorable terms from China, Iran, and North Korea. Vladimir Putin is not stopping his attacks against Ukraine and is instead stepping up the strikes. Even if on the 12th day Donald Trump announces sanctions, nothing fundamentally changes. The attacks will continue and Russian military support remains.
Что произойдет? Вот, допустим, ничего не происходит. Нет, Путин не сдается, он продолжает атаковать, он продолжает усиливать свои атаки против Украины. И вот наступает 12-й день, Трамп говорит, все, я ввожу санкции. Ну и что дальше? Да ничего не изменится, абсолютно.
First, Donald Trump's calculation will not work instantly. The sanctions he promised, 100%, 500%, remain mere statements. It will take time for them to take effect, for the United States to recalibrate its engagement with major countries linked to Russia, such as Brazil, India, China, and other lesser-known nations that continue to trade with Russia. In the meantime, Russia continues to produce drones and weapons.
Менее известные страны, которые сегодня еще торгуют с Россией, пока начнешь на них действовать. Ну, слушайте, дрон-то в России производится, оружие производится.
China continues to supply Russia with dual-use goods and components for drones. According to the Institute for the Study of War in Washington, the supply of parts for Russian drones is taking place openly, without attempts to conceal their dual purpose. A Chinese spokesperson said that the country is not interested in defeating Russia, thus signaling its position. Based on this, Donald Trump must build further actions. There are no hopes for change or positive shifts. There will be no euphoria.
Китай не заинтересован в поражении России. Все. Точки расставлены. Вот из этого должен исходить Трамп. Поэтому я никак не возлагаю больших надежд, никакой эйфории не будет.
Even if Donald Trump had said, the day after tomorrow, and told Vladimir Putin that if he did not stop the attacks against Ukraine, sanctions would be imposed, Putin's response would have been predictable. Dmitry Medvedev is already openly threatening the United States, because evil must be punished by force, only military force. No threats or sanctions work. The question arises, why doesn't Trump act openly? He does not want Russia to perceive the US as a participant in the war, fearing that this will encourage Putin to use nuclear weapons.
Ну, во-первых, он не хочет, чтобы Путин воспринял Америку как участницу войны против России, и чтобы действительно не, знаете, шантажировать, не, знаете, не толкать его к мысли о том, что у России ничего не остается, как применить ядерное оружие.
Donald Trump is wrong. Vladimir Putin is the same character from his stories about the teenager cornered by a rat who went on the attack to save himself. Today, Putin feels cornered and ready to attack. How ready he is unknown because Trump has never once demonstrated military might. He is obliged to do so, but again he does not. My concern is different. Imagine Putin heard Trump's statement yesterday and continues to escalate his attacks on Ukraine, as he has been doing so far.
Насколько он готов, мы еще не знаем. Почему? Потому что Трамп еще ни разу не показал свою мощь, военную силу. Он обязан это сделать. Но Трамп опять-таки не сделает этого. Меня волнует другое, совсем другое. Представьте себе, что сегодня Путин, услышав вот вчера слова Трампа, он будет наращивать атаки на Украину, как он это делал до сих пор.
Vladimir Putin will continue to escalate his strikes on Ukraine, wherever he can and wherever he wants. On the 11th day, he may tell Donald Trump that he is ready to come to the negotiating table. Perhaps he will give up some demands that were not previously voiced, but there are positions he will not give up. The 4 occupied regions of Ukraine, including partially controlled territories, as well as Crimea. He will not agree to Ukraine's accession to NATO.
Но давайте мы будем говорить о том, о чем Путин никогда не откажется. Прежде всего, он не откажется от 4 областей оккупированных, пусть даже не полностью, 4 областей Украины. Крыма он не откажется. Он не откажется о том, чтобы Украина не стала членом НАТО. Это 2.
Putin is likely to demand guarantees from the United States that Ukraine will not try to regain the occupied territories by force. A similar situation already occurred in 1954, when the Soviet Union insisted on similar guarantees from America in negotiations over the borders between West and East Germany. This time, Putin may make a similar demand. At the same time, he may declare that he has no objection to Ukraine's accession to the European Union.
Границах Западной и Восточной Германии. Вот тогда Советский Союз требовал от Америки гарантий. Так вот, в этот раз вполне возможно, Путин может это потребовать. Вот это очень важно. Путин скажет, я не против, чтобы Украина вошла в Европейский Союз, нет проблем.
Putin may offer concessions, such as limited and controlled arming of Ukraine. However, there is a fear that, taking advantage of this, Donald Trump will start pressuring Vladimir Zelensky to accept the terms at any cost, arguing that Putin wants a peace deal. Trump's problem is that he doesn't get it. A ceasefire doesn't mean peace. Peace is both sides agreeing on a fair basis.
Путин пошел на мировую, теперь ты прими это любой ценой, заканчивайте. Беда Трампа в том, что он не понимает, что перемирие это не означает мир. Мир означает согласие обеих сторон на справедливой основе.
If Donald Trump seeks a truce at any cost, especially in Ukraine and including in the Middle East region between Israel and Iran, there will be no peace. Peace must be fair and just. Fairness is the return of Ukrainian territories to the 1991 borders, recognized by the international community, enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution, and confirmed by the U.S. Congress. This is enough.
Справедливость это возврат украинских территорий, друзья мои, до границ 91 года, общепризнанных мировым сообществом раз, являющихся частью украинской конституции, два, и третье, признанное нашим Конгрессом.
Boris Yakovlevich, it turns out that Donald Trump still does not realize the seriousness of the situation. Recently, the Austrian foreign minister said that Trump allegedly offered Vladimir Putin to keep the four occupied, even if not fully occupied, regions of Ukraine and Crimea for Russia. Putin did not immediately agree, and now Trump is acting differently. It seems that the issue of preserving the territorial integrity of Ukraine is not a priority for Trump. Unfortunately, there is some truth to this. Donald Trump doesn't care about justice. He spoke about it in the presence of Vladimir Zelensky last September at a meeting in Trump Tower. Then, in front of journalists, he said that any deal is possible only on a fair basis. Today, Trump does not use this word.
Прекрасная встреча была, когда он публично в окружении журналистов сказал, что он, если и будет сделка, то только на справедливой основе. Сегодня слово «справедливость» Трамп не применяет. Абсолютно.
Until Donald Trump realizes that peace must be based on mutual consent and protection of the interests of the victim, Ukraine, it is impossible to talk about a just peace. Ukraine's interests have been destroyed by the occupation of 20% of its territory, and these territories must be returned. Vladimir Putin will not go for this, it is obvious. Therefore, the situation has reached an impasse. The only way to stop Putin is to act unexpectedly, from a direction that will be an unexpected blow to him, or will touch his vulnerable point.
Мы знаем, что Путин на это не пойдет. Мы прекрасно это знаем. Поэтому я опять возвращаюсь, что опять-таки коса нашла на камень. Единственный вариант угомонить этого Путина – это подойти с другой стороны. Со стороны, от которой Путин никак не ожидает, или с той стороны, которая является путинской ахиллесовой пятой.
I'm referring to China. No matter how much we try to show strength, it is necessary to negotiate with China. China is waiting for proposals from Donald Trump. In the case of a choice between Russia and the West, China will prefer the West over Vladimir Putin. Xi Jinping is keen to maximize the benefits of engagement with Trump. So far, no offers have been made by Trump.
Почему? Да потому что в самом последнем случае, если будет у Китая выбор между Россией и Западом, он предпочтет Запад, он не предпочтет Путина. Запомните это раз и навсегда, потому что Си Цзиньпинь сегодня хочет выжить по максимуму от Трампа. По максимуму, пока Трамп ему ничего не предложил.
Trade wars with China are far from the only issue. In addition to tariffs, there is the issue of Taiwan, the TikTok platform, cooperation with the World Trade Organization, and the supply of rare earth metals. The US has a long-term agreement with China, but Beijing is beginning to manipulate supplies, threatening Donald Trump with a full stop. This is causing concern among US diplomats, including Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo.
Редкоземельные металлы, когда у нас есть долгосрочный договор с Китаем, а Китай уже, знаете, вот жонглирует этим, угрожая Трампу тем, что мы вообще можем прекратить тебе ничего не давать. То есть все вот дипломаты американские, прежде всего Лютник, вот этот вот министр торговли,
Donald Trump has one problem. He doesn't realize that there should be no choice between profit and the values on which American society and Western civilization are based. He argues that each of the issues requires a separate approach, and that is probably true. You can't lump all issues into one package and, for example, make a trade deal with the 27-nation European Union. Trump held a meeting with Ursula von der Leyen and achieved a solution in his favor. Europe will pay 15% on imports of goods to the United States. Previously, there were no such conditions. Ursula von der Leyen agreed. She had no choice. However, everything is much more complicated with China.
Но у Трампа одна проблема. Он не может понять, что сегодня не должно быть у него выбора между деньгами, то есть прибылью, и ценностями, человеческими ценностями, ценностями, на которых зиждется американское общество и вся западная цивилизация.
Donald Trump still has money as his priority, to make more money, to increase wealth, but we must not forget our roots, our commitment to Europe. The evil that has raised its hand on these values, Vladimir Putin and Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, seeks to destroy the only oasis of freedom in the Islamic world, Israel. Trump is still determined to negotiate and trade instead of acting on principle.
Это Европа, откуда наши корни европейские. И зло, которое сегодня подняло руку на наши корни в лице того же Путина, в лице того же Аятоллы, которое поставило целью собой уничтожить единственный оазис в исламском мире, это Израиль. Так вот, у Трампа, к сожалению, все еще в голове мысли сесть за стол переговоров, уговорить, торговать.
Donald Trump's business successes have long been built on two factors: personal contact with an opponent or negotiating partner, and artificial escalation of tensions and its subsequent reduction in order to achieve favorable terms. These are the tactics he applies in tariff policy. However, when confronted with crimes against humanity, when evil has been terrorizing Ukrainian land and people for the fourth year, these methods fail. Trump himself admits that this problem has turned out to be much more complicated than he anticipated.
Преступлений против человечности, когда зло вот уже 4-й год терроризирует бедную многострадальную украинскую землю, народ, его подходы не работают Трампа. Он уже честно признается, что вот, оказалась трудная проблема, я не знал.
Donald Trump should listen to those with experience and expertise. Joe Biden, in the author's opinion, missed an opportunity to end the war in its first days, when Vladimir Putin was weaker and did not have close ties with China and North Korea. Ukraine needed support, which could have been provided in full at that time. However, that chance has been missed. As of today, Trump's statement about the 10 to 12-day deadline is not optimistic. Unless he begins delivering offensive weapons to Ukraine, such as M1 Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, HIMARS artillery systems, Javelin anti-tank systems, and AIM-120 air missiles, there will be no turning point in the war in Ukraine's favor.
Нет, до тех пор, пока Трамп не будет давать Украине наступательные виды вооружений, никакого сдвига в войне в пользу Украины мы не будем иметь.
There are signs that Donald Trump has begun to change his approach. A few days ago, he instructed the Pentagon to award 2 contracts to U.S. defense corporations for special missiles for Ukraine. These are air-to-ground missiles with a range of 450 kilometers, a flight altitude of less than 300 meters, making them undetectable to radar systems, and without satellite navigation. Deliveries of these missiles to Ukraine are expected in the coming days or weeks in significant quantities.
Радиусом 50 километров, летающие ниже 300 метров, то есть радарами их не перехватишь, и без спутниковой навигации. Вот это очень интересно. Так вот, они будут поставлены Украине уже вроде бы, вот там, на этой ближайшие несколько дней, даже недель, в хорошем, большом количестве будут поступать.
The missiles are intended for both MiG fighter jets in Ukraine's inventory and F-16 aircraft, which the country clearly lacks. According to authoritative sources, Donald Trump instructed European countries, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, as well as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, during a meeting in Scotland, French President Emmanuel Macron, and other countries possessing F-16 aircraft to transfer them to Ukraine. Previously, such deliveries were impossible without U.S. consent. Now permission has been granted. The aviation coalition formed in the first months of the war with the participation of Denmark, Belgium, and the Netherlands, which promised to deliver about 100 planes, has not yet fulfilled its obligations. Now there is authorization. European countries can supply Ukraine with F-16 fighter jets. This is a positive step. In addition, the U.S. Congress last week approved $6 billion in aid to Ukraine. The decision was made by the lower house, and in the coming days should be voted on in the Senate. Donald Trump is expected to sign this aid package. Without his approval, it would not have passed. These are important shifts. Also, Trump, according to information from the NATO summit in The Hague, has agreed with European countries to supply any kind of weapons to Ukraine in unlimited quantities, subject to payment.
На саммите НАТО в Гааге договорился с европейскими странами, что он будет поставлять в неограниченном количестве любой вид вооружений, но за деньги.
Europe has agreed, and now there is an additional source of arms supplies. This inspires hope for favorable prospects. But we should not get euphoric about the fact that Donald Trump has reduced the deadline from 50 to 10 or 12 days. Until Ukraine gets offensive weapons, the situation will not change. Without weapons, there will be no calm. Only force, only armament. There is no other way out. On the one hand, military power. On the other, China. Donald Trump needs to urgently meet with Xi Jinping and discuss Russia exclusively, without Vladimir Putin. Trump has leverage over China, and it has been said repeatedly. Many are pointing out that Trump is threatening to impose secondary sanctions against Russia and those who continue to buy Russian oil and gas.
Вторичными санкциями против России, против тех, кто будет покупать нефть и газ у России.
The US and China are discussing a trade deal for the second day, Bloomberg reports. Talks between Chinese Vice Premier He Lifan and US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent are taking place in Stockholm. Among the key topics is China's purchase of oil from Russia and Iran. Presumably, they are also discussing Donald Trump's ultimatum to impose secondary duties against buyers of Russian oil if they refuse to peacefully resolve the conflict in Ukraine. China remains the main importer of Russian oil. The possibility of Donald Trump imposing 100% duties in case Vladimir Putin refuses to end the war is now being discussed. The day before, the United States and the European Union concluded a trade agreement, one of the clauses of which was the EU's commitment to increase purchases of American oil and gas. If the United States reaches an agreement with China, the whole world will face a choice between cooperation with America and support for Russian energy.
будет поставлен Америкой перед выбором.
Either you continue to cooperate with Russia and buy oil and gas, or you lose access to the US market, or you retain this access but refuse to buy Russian energy resources. What do you think China will do? On the one hand, it considers Russia an ally and states that it would not benefit from the Russian Federation's defeat in this war.
Китай считает Россию своим союзником и говорит о том, что ему невыгодно, чтобы Российская Федерация проиграла в этой войне.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yueshan said that China is not interested in Russia's defeat. This is in line with an ancient Chinese proverb. When two predators fight, one should not interfere. China is interested in weakening both Russia, which it may eventually absorb, and the United States. However, if China comes under external pressure, Donald Trump has effective leverage to achieve the desired result. Nevertheless, Trump has so far taken a formulaic approach toward China.
Но всему есть предел. И вот когда Китай прижмешь к стенке, я уже говорил, у Трампа есть хорошие рычаги сделать это, запросто. Он может это сделать. Но вот Трамп, к сожалению, подходит пока Китаю шаблонно.
China is an exceptional country with the largest economy in the world by absolute numbers. The US today depends on China for 40% of its economy. Every third product on American shelves is made in China. The approach that Donald Trump is taking with China and has previously taken with Europe is not working. If Trump starts imposing duties, it will have an immediate impact on American consumers.
Сегодня каждый третий продукт в наших магазинах сделан в Китае. И что вы хотите? Что Трамп вот скажет, вот тебе пошлины, шмошлины, так это же эхом отзовется на нас, рядовых американцев.
During the pandemic, when China stopped supplying goods, the United States faced shortages of even basic protective equipment. Despite its status as a leading scientific and space power, the country was unable to provide basic disposable masks. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said he had purchased 1.5 million masks at a cost of $7 apiece. This is a clear example of the deep dependence of the American economy on supplies from China.
Люди, общаясь друг с другом, посещая общественные места, и тогда еще губернатор Нью-Йорка Куомо хвастался, что он купил десятки тысяч, и даже нет, он даже сказал 1,5 миллиона масок, и вы не поверите, по какой цене. Он платил по $7 за штуку, за одну маску одноразового пользования.
It is disgraceful that during the pandemic, the US purchased masks from China. There is no guarantee that the country will not find itself in a similar situation again if tough sanctions are imposed against China and rejection of Chinese goods. 100% duties would mean a de facto boycott, so this is only a shock to the air for now. Donald Trump must realize that China is not Europe, Africa, or Latin America. It is necessary to negotiate with China, take into account the peculiarities of its economy, and use the available leverage.
Поэтому пока это просто потрясение воздуха. Еще раз повторяю, Трамп должен понимать, что Китай это не Европа, Китай это не Африка и не Латинская Америка. С Китаем надо считаться, надо сесть за стол переговоров, применить свои рычаги, положить на стол.
Russia represents a Nazi and fascist state, while the West represents the force that gave China the opportunity to develop. Thanks to Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger, the West's doors were opened to China, allowing it access to advanced technology. More than 300 major American corporations now operate in China, including Intel, Tesla, Microsoft, and Meta. These companies provide millions of jobs to the Chinese while supplying high technology.
Более 300 крупнейших корпораций Америки работают в Китае. Они дают десятки тысяч рабочих мест китайцам. Там Intel, там Tesla, там Microsoft, там Facebook, там кого только нет из крупнейших корпораций Америки. Во-первых, эти компании дают работу миллионам китайцев,
China does not sit idly by. It copies technology, transports it to other countries, adapts it, and sells it back, including to U.S. consumers. The U.S. knows this. If China's supply is cut off, there are alternative markets: India, the Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, and others. Donald Trump has not yet used these levers of pressure. He can only apply them in direct dialogue with Xi Jinping. Neither Vladimir Putin nor other figures should be involved. Negotiations should take place exclusively between the leaders of the world's two largest economies.
Вьетнам, многое другое. Эти рычаги Трамп еще не применял. Ни разу. Он может это применить только тет напротив Си Цзиньпиня. Тет на тет. Никаких Путинов, Шмутинов не должно быть и близко. Они должны говорить только друг с другом, как две крупнейшие экономики мира.
Taiwan is a separate issue, but moving forward is only possible through specific agreements. A 10 to 12-day deadline will not solve the problem. Until Donald Trump realizes that Ukraine needs to be given everything it asks for, there will be no change. Ukraine needs offensive weapons, long-range ATAC-EMS operational tactical missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and financial support. Europe is providing aid. The U.S. is making arms sales. America is not directly involved. It sells, and this does not raise any questions.
Атакамцы большого радиуса действия, томагавки обязательно, без разговоров. Деньги. Пожалуйста, Европа дает, Америка продает. Нет проблем. Америка сама не участвует, она продает. Нет проблем.
Patriot systems of at least 50 should cover all regional energy and military centers of Ukraine. This is feasible and economically justified. Ukraine has never requested the presence of foreign soldiers on its territory. Today, one Ukrainian soldier is comparable to 5 soldiers from Western countries in terms of courage, bravery, and military experience. No Western soldier has participated in combat operations in the center of Europe since World War II and has no relevant experience. The Ukrainian soldier has this experience and is the savior not only of Ukraine, but of Russia itself.
Поэтому 1000 раз спасибо великому украинскому солдату, который, кстати, является и спасителем самой России.
Only the destruction of Vladimir Putin's regime will save Russia. One day there will be a monument to the great Ukrainian soldier savior in a Moscow square. Donald Trump must come to the realization that only large-scale military aid to Ukraine can solve all issues. On the one hand, weapons on the other, a personal dialogue with Xi Jinping. If Trump is positioning himself as a world-class leader, he must abandon intermediaries like the Secretary of Commerce or the Secretary of the Treasury and negotiate directly. There is no other way.
Сегодня надо перестать возлагать надежды на министра торговли, министра финансов, чушь собачья. Договаривайся. Вот такая повестка дня, я сажусь с Си Цзиньпинем говорить один на один.
The U.S. should provide Ukraine with more weapons, as only the language of force can be spoken to Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin has already responded to Donald Trump's new ultimatums by announcing the continuation of the so-called special military operation. They can only be stopped by military might. Trump's statement about 10 to 12 days, according to many experts, is related to the expiration of the current trade agreement between the United States and China on duties, which ends on August 12.
Такое уверенное заявление Трампа, что вот Путину 10 дней, именно с тем, что 12 августа заканчивается действующее соглашение между США и Китаем по пошлинам.
The United States and the European Union have concluded an agreement under which the EU undertakes to increase purchases of American energy resources as an alternative to Russian ones. This decision has influenced Donald Trump's position. There is speculation that the U.S. is also in closed-door talks with India, Brazil, and Turkey, and may have reached informal agreements with Saudi Arabia to increase oil production. These steps are aimed at building global pressure on buyers of Russian energy resources and strengthening U.S. energy influence. Yes, this is confirmed by information from reliable sources, including the politician's entourage. It's a work in progress. Donald Trump is acting in accordance with his slogan, "Drill, drill, 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 my baby drill." Extensive preparations are being made in the U.S., although ordinary Americans have not yet felt it in gasoline prices. Nevertheless, it is hoped that the effect will become visible by the end of this year and the beginning of next year.
Ведется огромная подготовительная работа у нас в Америке. И хотя мы, рядовые американцы, это сильно не почувствовали, хотя бы по ценам на бензин, и тем не менее есть надежда, что это будет ощутимо уже к концу этого года и в начале следующего.
The first signs of increased energy production are already being seen in the U.S. This is not only about oil production from previously mothballed reserve sources, but also about the continuation of unconventional methods, such as fracking. Liquefied natural gas is becoming one of the key U.S. exports. According to calculations, America is ready to supply this resource in large volumes to the global market.
Сжиженный газ сегодня становится одним из главнейших видов товаров на экспорт американских. Вот это очень важно. И Америка готова по расчетам завалить мир вот этим самым.
The United States has sufficient capacity to increase energy production and, with the participation of allies, is able to influence the global energy market. During his visit to the Middle East, Donald Trump held successful negotiations with the emirs of 3 Arab countries, during which they discussed the redistribution of influence on the oil market and the actual termination of the existence of OPEC in favor of control by Arab countries and the United States. China is fully aware of what is happening and does not want to be left out of these processes. Donald Trump may offer Xi Jinping to join a partnership on equal terms in exchange for support to remove Vladimir Putin's regime, which a source believes is guilty of genocide. It is expected that Xi Jinping may agree to this if there are favorable offers. Energy negotiations are taking place and are obvious, which is beneficial to Trump both in terms of image building and as a way to supplement the U.S. budget from trade revenues.
Это правда, это очевидно, и это очень выгодно Трампу. И как в пользу его имиджа, его репутации, и, конечно же, как, знаете, вот переговорщика по прибыли, по доходам в пользу, в казну американскую.
All of this is in Donald Trump's interests, and he is apparently committed to it. Such measures will deal a blow to the Russian economy. Vladimir Zelensky notes that under such a development, Vladimir Putin will be left with 3 options: to end the war and cease fire, to start a direct military confrontation with the United States of America, as Dmitry Medvedev stated, or to continue fighting, completely cutting social spending in favor of the military.
Он будет просто продолжать войну, но при этом сокращать все расходы на социальные выплаты, и все пойдет на...
The Russian economy is in decline and continues to shrink. Dmitry Medvedev and Vladimir Putin play the roles of bad cop and good cop. Today, Medvedev makes harsh statements, and tomorrow a scenario is possible in which Putin speaks of his readiness to establish relations with Donald Trump. Such threats have been heard before, from both Medvedev and Putin. He showed animations of flying missiles, among them Sarmat, Burevestnik, Avangard, supposedly capable of striking Washington, New York, and Florida. All of this has already been shown and memorized. Bragging is a sign of weakness. Donald Trump pays no attention to it. As the leader of the world's strongest power, he must act wisely and decisively. Procrastination is dangerous. While we are having this conversation, missiles and bombs continue to fall on Ukraine.
Мощнейшие державы в мире поступить еще и мудро. И причем не откладывать долгий ящик. Каждое промедление, оно смерти подобно. Сегодня мы каждую минуту, вот мы сейчас с вами говорим, ракеты и бомбы продолжают падать на Украину.
This must not be allowed to happen. Unfortunately, the international community has come to accept terrorist acts, as in Israel, and the massive shelling of Ukrainian territory as the norm for these societies. That is a disgrace. We bear responsibility for what is happening in the Middle East and Ukraine. It is time to provide real help to these nations to stop the aggressor. Donald Trump is beginning to realize the need for decisive action and the role of force. How deeply he understands this, time will tell.
Давненько пора расплачиваться с этими народами, помочь им решить эти проблемы и поставить на место агрессора, что неминуемо. Трамп, к счастью, только-только начинает прозревать, только-только начинает понимать это. Но вот насколько, давайте подождем, посмотрим. Я не думаю, что он уже не начинает понимать, что сила нужна.
Many of the arms deliveries to Ukraine are being made without public announcements. Some U.S. corporations have already started or are preparing to establish joint ventures in Ukraine, including the production of drones and other weapons in which Ukraine has practical experience. The U.S. Congress has approved the relevant initiatives. All this strengthens confidence in further development and support.
Если не там, то готовится прибыть в Украину по созданию совместных компаний, совместных корпораций по производству, например, тех же дронов и других видов оружия, в которых Украина имеет определенный навык. Вот это уже имеет место. Тем более Конгресс нас уже одобрил это. Вот это очень важно. Поэтому я очень все-таки оптимистичен в этом отношении.
The movement to help Ukraine is already underway and will be ramped up. It is important to hear Donald Trump's statement regarding the end of the war in Ukraine and his anticipated steps. After 12 days, it is unlikely that he will propose an extension of the current strategy. Sanctions are only part of the pressure, but effective help for Ukraine is needed and must be seen and felt on the front lines. This is the main hope. There are no other options.
Но я возвращаюсь к началу нашего разговора. Санкции санкциями, а вот помощь должна быть Украине оказана действенная, чтобы мы это услышали, увидели и почувствовали на фронтах войны Украины.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed to journalists that he is holding talks with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sale of Ukrainian drones. There is an agreement, and the preparation of the deal has been assigned to Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, and the head of the defense industry Ivan Kamyshin. It is supposed to be a large contract worth between $10 and $30 billion. It is a favorable deal, as Donald Trump puts it. In exchange for Ukrainian drones, the delivery of powerful American weaponry is expected. This is already being talked about in the U.S. Congress. Some U.S. congressmen during the session expressed support for the idea of financial assistance to private companies that plan to participate in the production of weapons on the territory of Ukraine. Such an initiative, with the support of the political elite, has a high chance of realization. Donald Trump is aware of these plans, and even if he does not speak out publicly, will not prevent them. Boris Pincus, thank you for your interesting conversation and your participation on the air. I wish you a pleasant day. I remind you that Boris Pincus was with us. Friends, please leave comments, indicate the country and city from which you are watching us. Like this video, subscribe to the 24th YouTube channel, as well as my personal one. Thank you for your attention. I wish you nothing but good news. See you soon. Glory to Ukraine. We will win. Glory to the heroes.
Спасибо вам большое, дорогие, и слава Украине. Мы победим, в этом нет никакого сомнения, и очень скоро.
Героям слава!